talks about the concept of obligation and taklif. And that as Muslims, we see that we have many obligations that Allah has given for us. Some might view these as a burden for themselves because man generally likes to be free, especially Western man. But when we analyze divine obligations and we see that in actuality this is a program that Allah has given to us, this is a path, a sabil, that Allah has set forth for us to get to know Him, you come to the conclusion that we must be very grateful for these taklif and obligations. Because we see throughout history, whoever He wanted to honor and exalt, He has given them difficult tasks, given them obligations. And you see then, when they perform, they get maqam and they get position. Or you see individuals who they perform Hajj, they have more obligations. Those who are in Shahr Ramadan fasting and observing, they have more obligations. So we have to set this aside that we are, in a way, afraid of tests from Allah. We are afraid of obligations from God. That we have to get ourselves used to appreciating these obligations. Imagine if God just created us and just left us in this world without any instruction. And that you're just left yourself, figure it out. On the day of judgment, could we not complain to God and say, why didn't you send me a path? Why didn't you show me the way? Have you ever invited someone to your house? Imagine inviting them to your house and you never send the address. Maybe you do this to those people you don't want to come to your house. And you want them to go somewhere else and get lost, for example. But that is the same way if God creates us, He is a sustainer, but doesn't give us things to do, a path to reach Him, then it's as if He has created us and not giving us the address to reach Him. So divine obligation and tasks and tests that God gives us is nothing but a path to reach God. And the greater that prophet is, the greater that imam is, you see that God tests him more. Throughout the Quran, there's these great examples of these prophets of ulul azm, of divine resolve, and how they live their life. And after one test is done, another one starts. Another test is done, another one starts. Until you see, for example, the maqam of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, that after all these kalamat that are done, Allah now says, you are an imam. You have the position of imam. In the Quran and other places says about Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam that he had done wafa, for example. He has completely taken, in one interpretation of this verse, he has completely taken whatever the world had to offer. However, a world completes a human being, had completed Prophet Ibrahim. So therefore, he is complete, he has taken. So therefore, we have not to be afraid of obligations and taklif. We have to, in a way, talk to ourselves and have this discussion. Can we make obligation less bitter? Can we actually go a higher step than this? And that is to actually enjoy divine obligations. To like these tests and challenges that Allah has. We see when one person talks about Islam, they love the theology. They love the irfan and mysticism. But when you talk to them about fiqh, you talk to them about jurisprudence, you talk to them about haram and halal and wajib and obligation, then they say, don't show that to me. That's difficult. No, I don't want to know because it's difficult for me. But is this true? That obligations are difficult. Tonight, we're going to talk about how can I make divine obligations easier for myself. Please recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Throughout history, we have individuals who not only did they perform that wajib task that God wanted for them, they actually went above and beyond. One of them is a very holy lady who's buried in the holy city of Qum. And that is Sayyidah Fatima al-Ma'suma alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajma'in. The month of Dhul Qa'dah that we're in, actually, we remember the first of this month is also being the day of the daughter, because Fatima Ma'suma alayhi salam was not married. But yet, she had an obligation. It wasn't wajib. She was in Medina, living comfortably, in Medina, because that is the city of the Prophet, city where Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam were. But they had taken her brother, Imam Rida alayhi salam, which is both from mother and father, she's related to him, and decided to see her brother. And we have to look at it this way, not only brother is actually Imam, because that relationship with the infallibles and Ahlul Bayt and the family and the awliya of God, it is higher than brother because she's coming to visit the Imam of the age, to do ziyarat of her brother, which is the Imam. And all the times too, when you look at the story of Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam in Karbala, it's the respect that one has of the infallible Imam. Brother is very important, yes, but higher than brother is Imam. Higher than brother is Imam. And how great it is when the brother is actually an Imam. Nur ala nur. So therefore, this journey, if you really think of it, maybe 2,000-3,000 kilometers, which is about, say, 1,000, 1,500 miles, from Medina to Marv, not only Mashhad, Marv, which is modern-day Turkmenistan. This journey might take 30 days, might take 60 days, maybe might take 3 months. If you look at how people would travel, say, 150 kilometers, for example, or how much, 10 kilometers, 15 kilometers a day, something like that, how much they travel, and how long it would take to take this difficult journey for a holy lady who's not married to come and visit her brother during the government of the Abbasids. The same government who had killed her father. Same government that put her father in prison for many years. And now they were afraid. That's why they brought and had respect to Imam Rida alayhi salam, because they knew that the Alawis would revolt. How can you take the infallible Imam, put him in prison for many years? So therefore, this obligation, that it wasn't a wujubi obligation, it's something mustahab, ziyarat is mustahab, visiting is recommended, is good. It's going to show the status of the Imam, how important the Imam is for the people. It is also for her to see the Imam. But unfortunately, she's not successful. She's successful in getting the reward. But in order for her to see the Imam, either she was poisoned in Save, or, she became ill, and she came to Qom for about a few weeks. And the people of Qom were very respectful towards her. Very, very. They gave her a place, a house to worship. Today, that place is called Bayt al-Nur. The place where they say Sayyidah there would worship Allah. 2 or 3 weeks, and they're at her service, and they're so happy. And today, even the day that they remember that she entered the holy city of Qom, they remember it and come with flowers. So this is the day that the daughter of Imam Qadim alayhi salam came to visit us. Therefore, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajma'in. Therefore, you see that she is the status she has, and this is from the awliya of Allah, you see from different imams that is encouraged to visit her. She's not a normal. Imam Qadim alayhi salam had many other daughters. But you see, for her, it is from Imam Sadiq, I believe, from Imam Jawad, from others, Imam Ridadi, some others, to visit even the narrations before she's, for example, even buried. To visit her, whoever visits her with ma'rifah, enters heaven. Or this title, Al-Ma'asuma, meaning the infallible. This title that is attributed by Imam Rida alayhi salam, that he says to her, she is infallible. So therefore, you see some of the awliya that have this position, they would take these obligations, as sometimes we're struggling with just our wajibat, but they would embark on difficult journeys in order to do something that is mustahab, recommended, for example. So we have to learn from Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam that we cannot limit ourselves to only the wajib obligations and to complain about it and to say how difficult it is. That actually there's a lot more out there, a lot more stories I have, but because we're limited with time, we have to continue our discussion on how to make obligations less difficult, less bitter. When it comes to behavior, brothers and sisters, man's actions, some say, come from three sources. Either we identify a good action, we identify taklif, we identify the right and wrong, and we say, I must do this. For example, I identify it. I look at my mind and I study something and I say, this is the right thing to do. One. So one is identification by myself. Two, sometimes I do actions because I like to, my desires. Maybe someone like me, most of my actions based on my desires. I eat food that I like. If I go to a restaurant, I choose the one that I like. I don't choose the one that I don't like. I don't choose the one that has the most thawab, for example, has the most reward. I choose what I like, or the flavor I like. Or I dress how I like, for example. And if you look at it, maybe most of our decisions are from this part, the desires. How I dress, what I want to say, how I want to live. The third is my life or my decisions are based on taklif, divine obligations. So we said three. One, I identify myself. Two is my desires. And the third is it is wajib or is haram, for example. Now, sometimes I can understand in number one and number three go together. Sometimes I understand the taklif. It makes sense for me, for example. But sometimes I don't understand the taklif. I don't know the philosophy of that ruling. Why is this haram? Why is it allowed? Why do I have to do this, for example? Do you know the philosophy for every single thing that you do? You know, generally it is good. Generally, you know that it is from Allah. But that's what gives us so much reward in it. Many of times you don't know even something. And your mind is saying even something else. I don't even understand it. But I know it is a verse of Holy Quran. I know it is from the hadith. I know this is the jurist gave this fatwa. Therefore, I put what I understand separately and I submit to the will of Allah. And that is when you get the most amount of reward. When that action is against your desire. When that action maybe sometimes doesn't make sense. But I know it is from Allah. I know I have to submit. Let's look at, for example, our prayers. One of the difficult tasks, at least for someone like me, maybe not for you, is prayers, salat. Why is prayer hard? Look at all the conditions about libasul musalli. For example, the person who prays, look at the clothes he has to have. Or, for example, tahara they have to have. Or wudu they have to have. Or ghusl they have to have. Or finding the qibla, for example. All these other conditions in order just to talk to Allah. It has to be at the right time. You have to learn it in Arabic. You have to recite the surah correctly, for example. You cannot do ruku. You cannot add another ruku. You cannot add two sujuds. All the other arkan that salat and wajib components that it has. It's difficult to learn and practice. I'm busy at work and it's salat time. What do I do? I'm tired. I want to sleep tonight. I don't even want to brush my teeth, for example. I just want to sleep. Does that ever happen? You just want to sleep. Oh, I have to pray Maghrib, Isha. In Fajr prayers, morning prayers. And some the youth say, if God removed this part of the wajibat, many people would become Muslim. Many people would become Muslim if Fajr prayers was not wajib. That's a joke. Difficult. Because it's wajib, you have to wake up. But now, that amount of hardship, there's hardship in it, right? To some extent, it is difficult, especially 5 times a day. Now, the thing that I have to understand is this. Which one is more difficult? Is not praying more difficult or praying difficult? Imagine now I don't pray. I don't do salah. I leave it. For example, that's how, God forbid, some people are. They do 1 sin, 2 sins, 3 sins. They lose hope in God, and they say, I'm not going to pray anymore. It's too difficult for me. I don't want to pray. Now they say, I don't do salat. I don't perform the prayer. Is that more difficult, or is praying more difficult? Which one do you think? When you really think about it, you see that actually from these 3 things, sometimes we said that our actions come from mail, our love, for example, desire. Sometimes it comes from tashkhis, or it comes from our ability to identify something. And sometimes it comes from obligations. And doesn't regardless if you love to do it, if you understand or not, it is the obligation. It's from God. You have to do it. But now, is it harder not to pray or to pray? Which one? Let's say, God forbid, someone doesn't pray. Let's say someone doesn't pray. What happens to them? They stop, all the benefits of salat get removed. I'm not now talking about that nur and light. That's very good. That's true. But the fact that they used to pray in business, and it meant that they were concentrating on God when they were performing business. They were doing business transactions, for example. They're at work. They were thinking of God. So therefore now that he doesn't really think about God and his business, and he doesn't do dhuhr and asr, well, now he's kind of free to do whatever he wants. Now that he's free to do whatever he wants, he's going to get himself into more trouble. Because now maybe if somebody doesn't look, I don't really care if it's haram money or not, because, I left the taklif, I left the obligations, I left the salat. Let me cut a corner here. Let me cut a corner here. Now there's a bribe coming in. Maybe take this bribe, for example. Now I don't care about, for example, the business and benefiting it. Then you see in the long term that person has actually in more hardship at the end. His business, for example, his career is less discipline. It is less in a way that he's always thinking to please God and has to follow the rules. Or when it comes to his general life, Quran is very interesting. It has a very beautiful verse about a person who forgets Allah. Quran says, وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكًا. And whoever leaves my remembrance, for him will be a ma'isha, which is life, that is dhank, which means restriction, which means suffocation. He will be suffocated in his life when a person forgets God. Brothers and sisters, how? Let's say someone leaves salat, this obligation. It's easier for him not to pray. I want to be free. I don't want to pray anymore. But I remove myself from the dhikr of Allah. How can forgetting God cause a more difficult, suffocating life? It will lead to one, because I don't remember God anymore, to more anxiety, to more selfishness, to more addiction and desires, because now I don't have any wajib things to do anymore. I'm not controlling myself anymore. It will lead to more spiritual emptiness. Therefore, you see that the modern man who has left prayer, left worship, left this because it was hard for him. There's obligations. I didn't want to do those obligations. Now there's actually more hardship for him. Now there's actually more difficulty in him. Now his life has dhanka in it, for example. Now, societies that leave God, societies that don't pray, also in the same way, we expand this idea, as in the books of tafsir say about this verse, to even in material advanced nations, you see the rise of deep anxiety, mistrust, crime, addiction, broken families, spiritual collapse happening. Why? Because they have left the remembrance of God. So which one was harder? Performing salat or leaving salat and leaving God? Being free for a little bit, but causing a lot of distress. It's as if a person is married, say has a good family, and there's examples of this, a very good family, has a husband or wife they like, and then they find one excuse, like, I don't like this about them, they don't love me enough, they don't listen to me. But he's like, is he honest? Yes. Is he fulfilling, for example, his monetary? Yes. All this, yes, but I want a divorce, I want to leave. Then they leave, and they go into that, again here, like hayat dhanka. They get a ma'ishat and dhanka. They go into a difficult life. Now they go into the life of someone who's divorced. And how hard is that loneliness, for example? Now they don't, with the children, what are they going to do? All these other problems that they have. Why? Because of one problem, which was that spouse. And everyone has faults. Everyone here has faults. And I tell those young people that are looking for, marriage, you're not going to find someone who does not have faults. But overlooking those faults, getting accustomed to that bitterness of hardship, you overcome that. But that bitterness, that hardship is much easier than leaving that marriage, leaving those kids, and going into a completely different level of hardships. So therefore, when I tell myself that yes, I have obligations, I have takalif. Sometimes those obligations are against my desires. I don't feel like doing it, but that's normal. Narrations have that you have sometimes iqbal and idbar of the heart. Sometimes heart wants to read Du'a Kumal, yes. Sometimes it doesn't want to read Du'a Kumal. Well, it's mustahab, I cannot read it, but do I have to do salat, even if I don't feel like doing it? Yes. But there's bitterness, there's hardship, but when I think of it, this hardship, which is a little bit, is much better than not performing salat, which will come to a different level of, I'm not even talking about the hereafter. Not even telling about hell and heaven. I'm talking about just this world, because the verse talks about a ma'isha, which is usually coming to this world. A world that modern man is full of addiction. Modern man cannot control himself, cannot control his anger, his temptation, his lower desires, and produces for himself someone who is more dangerous than a wolf. A man who has left desires open to do whatever they want and doesn't have any obligations, is not controlled and disciplined, is more dangerous than a wolf. I tell people this, be careful of humans. Be very careful, except the mu'mineen. Those who have worked on themselves, they are the trustworthy ones. They're the ones who have been performing salat 5 times a day. They're the ones who have been over and over challenging themselves. Another topic to talk about, now we're running a little bit late, is this. While taklif and obligation is bitter, do we sometimes in society do things that we don't like? Do we on purpose go into voluntary difficulty? Is this something prevalent? Is religion the only thing that is difficult? Or do many times there are different activities, different things that people put themselves in hardship for because they like to? Can you give me some examples of voluntary difficulty? One, I'll give you one that it's becoming more and more, according to statistics. About 32% of U.S. adults have tattoos. Tattoos, for example, right? It's difficult. I don't have any, for now at least this year I don't have any, but I'm sure that it hurts a lot. That's what I heard. I didn't try. But usually they say, there's this joke, they said this person wanted to get a tattoo of a lion, for example, is a joke. And he wanted to be a tough guy, for example. And he said, okay, start. And the guy started, piercing him. He was like, oh, that hurts, that hurts. What are you doing? He's like, the tail. So okay, forget the tail. The tail hurts. Forget the tail, for example. Okay, how about this part? It says tattooing, and that is like, the lion has, was the part of the male lion, the hair, the mane, for example. He says, no, forget that. Forget that part. I don't want that either. That hurts as well. I said, what kind of lion is this? Doesn't have a tail, doesn't have a mane. That's not a lion anymore. Go. Get out of here. So therefore it hurts. But people are willingly, not because of thawab or reward, because of either to identify as something, because of the art, or for whatever different reason, they want to get a tattoo. So people, there's one example of a difficulty that people like. Don't think that only Islam has, for example, the difficulty. One of them is tattoos. The other example I have for you is marathon. People run, for example, 1 million people in a year. Some statistics say run a marathon, about 26 miles, running 26 miles. Did you know that some people have heart attacks during a marathon? Minor heart attacks, or maybe full heart attacks, because it puts so much pressure on the heart. They have to check it. But why are they doing that? It has a lot of thawab, has a lot of reward. They like it. Hardship. Now, Islam doesn't ask you to run a marathon, for example. Islam doesn't tell you, it's wajib to get tattoos and to pierce under your skin. Or you see other things, extreme sports, or sometimes luxury hardships, cold plunges. People like to put ice in bathtubs and go in there, for example. I don't know. They like to do it. So do not blame and say that the only hardship is in Islam. Actually, people sometimes are willingly, voluntarily looking for hardship. So therefore, do not say, but as we said, that hardship of not doing is much more difficult than that hardship of doing. The second part that I'd like to talk about now is this. So therefore, when we talk about factors that make taklif, bitter. So one is this. Sometimes there is a lot of hype behind Islamic instructions. And there's a lot of media that says this is too hard. Hijab, for example, they attack hijab. Why don't they just let these ladies be free so they can go and, their hair can be in the sun and the wind. You're restricting them. Well, let's talk about some taklif like this, about all that hype. Is it really that difficult? Again, I'm giving examples that tattoos I don't have, and hijab I don't have. Another example that I don't do. But again, is it really that difficult to cover oneself? Now imagine the opposite. There is hardship, say. There is some difficulty. But what about not putting it on? How about that hardship and that hype, that if you remove all that hype, that hardship of leaving the hijab alone? Now how am I going to dress? Now I don't have any restrictions on my dress. People can approach me, talk to me, look at me, however they want. Even some that are not Muslim and they tried hijab, they say, I felt that security. I felt much more secure when I had the hijab up. I felt that dignity, morality that the hijab provided for me. What happens when somebody removes the hijab, then continues and dresses however they want to? Then you see that, God forbid, people will look at them more, for example. God forbid, they'll get into a haram relationship. How much more difficulty is mashaqqa is there? And if they get into that haram relationship, or they, for example, let go. So again, when you look at taqwa and how Shaykh Mutahari talks about it, taqwa and these instructions that Allah have for us are not restriction. They are protection. Do you talk about a house as being a restriction? I'm assuming everyone here has a place to stay. It's cold at night, for example. Some are saying there's snakes, for example, snake seasons. There's snakes outside, for example. It protects you from the animals. It protects you from pests. It protects you from cold weather. Do you call that restriction or do you call the house protection? So taqwa and these obligations that Allah sends for us is nothing but protection for us. So yes, it has some difficulty, but think of that difficulty of leaving it. And I'm not only talking about the hereafter, I'm talking about in this world. Again, whoever removes themselves from the remembrance of Allah, Allah will give them that ma'isha, that life that is danka, that is suffocating. The last thing that I'd like to talk about is this. What makes taklif easier? One, we said right now, that taklif becomes easier when we remove all that hype. There's a lot of hype in Islamic instruction. The other thing I'd like to say is, what makes taklif easier? That is, sometimes we also have to think of who that taklif comes from. Maybe we'll start this discussion. I think it's getting a little too late, and we'll say it, and then we'll, inshallah, continue it next Thursday night. When you look at a person who gives obligations, or a father, a teacher, or a friend, if they tell you to do something, and you really, really like them, it makes following that person, that instruction, much more easier because you like them, you don't want to disappoint them. But if you really don't like that person, you see kids sometimes they don't like a teacher in class. They never want to listen to that teacher. They don't really care too much unless they're afraid. But if they really like that teacher and they are, obviously, good children and they respect that teacher, they really want to follow him. So one of the other ways that makes taklif easier is the person who is giving us the obligation, who is telling us what to do. Who did Allah send for us to give these instructions for? Where are they coming from? From our Prophet, from Imam Ali, from Imam Hassan alayhi salam, from these beautiful individuals that if we truly realize how great they are, how much we love them, what sweethearts they are, then we don't want to upset them. We say, oh, it came from him, that instruction. You have this beautiful tradition from Imam Hassan alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And in Al-Khisal, it's from Imam Hassan. It also has about 3 Hassans in the tradition. We have some Hassans here tonight. Inna ahsan al-Hasan, the best, most favorable of Hassan, the best thing to do, the most beautiful thing, the most beautiful of beautiful things, khulqul Hasan, is good akhlaq. So inna ahsanul Hasan, khulqul Hasan. One of the most beautiful things in this world is that akhlaq and that behavior that is good. Now that you have good behavior and you're very humble, you're very forgiving, especially as a parent, and you want to teach your kids something, but you're, for example, something very harsh. Sometimes it's good. We said you don't have to always, spoil, that kid, make him the most spoiled kid in LA. But at the same time, you have to be firm. But when it comes from a very caring parent, a very loving parent, one they really have a great, absolutely love, and that parent as a friend and someone they love tells them, don't do this, that kid will listen. Compared to someone who's very harsh with that kid. So compared to someone that doesn't sacrifice for that kid. Compared to someone that doesn't really respect that child. You see the difference from themselves? If, for example, there's 2 people, one is instructing you, has very good, you're really lovable. He tells you, hey, brother, please, don't do this. Or one that, you don't really respect too much, hey, don't do this. Which one is different? It's much different from who it comes from. So what makes our taklif easier is when instruction comes from that person that is very lovable, that person that's very kind. And you have that, relationship with that person, and that makes it much, much easier to say, oh, who made this haram? What hadith from Imam Sadiq, from Imam Baqir, Imam Ali says this. Some narrations from Imam Mahdi, Ajallah Ta'ala Fajr Shaykh says this. The Rasulullah says this. This makes it much easier. And this is for us and for me a way as an instructor, as a parent, as a friend, that remember, the more kind you are, the more akhlaq you have, the most beautiful thing we said in this world is akhlaq or khulqul hasan, good behavior. Once you have that akhlaq, people will melt and they will do whatever you want them to. And we also have to realize this, that is the same way deen is. Deen is from sources of religion who are the most lovable of people, and their taklif that they are giving is the taklif of Allah. May Allah, inshallah, make us of those who fulfill their obligations. Please recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Ask Allah to bless us with the ziyarat of Lady Fatima and Masuma, inshallah, and Imam Rida alayhi salam, inshallah, in Mashhad. We ask Allah to be able to fulfill His obligations and takalif that He has for us, and to go, inshallah, above and beyond, and to give whatever we have, inshallah, in Allah's path. May Allah forgive our sins, our shortcomings. We do istighfar, inshallah, this Thursday night. We ask Allah to answer all of your hawa'ij, inshallah, and to cure all of the sick, especially the child or the baby who has surgery tomorrow, Brother Kayvan's daughter, and have rahmah of all the marhumeen, inshallah, and to expedite the return of Imam al-Zaman with his salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.